was the brother of my great-grandmother, White Buffalo woman. There must have been a considerable age difference between the two of them. Little Raven of the Arapaho side. My son's great-grandfather. In 1868, almost 4 years to the day of the Sand Creek, then we had the battle, or the massacre of the Washita, after we had signed our last treaty. And in those 4 treaties, within a span of about 40 years, we had given up virtually the bulk of our lands. This land that was, in terms of our creation account, so beautiful, that we were to keep alive through our ceremonies, still do, was God. Through the justified bond, the 19th century philosophy of manifest destiny and cultural imperialism. Fortunately, we survived. There are those of us that live in Oklahoma. There are those of us that live in Montana. There are those that have relocated to urban sprawl of America, but they're still Cheyennes. We still maintain our responsibility to earth and all life. We go into ceremony, we pray for all people. Histahil. Histahil means every person in this world. Ho'owan means all of the 4-legged relatives, those that crawl, those that fly. We pray for Histahil and Ho'owan. We pray for that grows from the earth. And for Mahel and Munstill, all of the celestial bodies, the wind, the sun, the thunder, the water. We're really having to pray hard today in terms of where we are. If we stop to think about global warming and climate change. But we still have that responsibility to earth. That was a sacred promise that we made to Mahel when we were given life on this earth, to walk through life. So I'm still walking, as is my son, as are my grandchildren. And you too are walking. And all I know that we ever want for each other, and I want for you, is good health, long life, happiness, and peace. Nothing more, nothing less. That's the road I have to walk. That's the road that we as Cheyennes walk. And I want to thank you today for inviting me to share a few of my words with you, a little of my worldview, and to help me understand what happened in that time that you are looking at in terms of the Indian wars, or maybe we say the war with the Indians. I thank you.
take a few questions because I'm sure you have some, so.
Thank you, Dr. Mann, for speaking. I didn't get the color that you said was the adulthood. I got the white, red,
Yellow.
yellow, okay, and then, the
I'm
other-
sorry, I left that out.
and-
You're yellow. It's a symbol of perfection.
Oh, that's
It's
right.
the time to do.
Oh, I knew it was the time.
We cherish, although we love red and blue or black, we cherish yellow.
My other question was, I didn't get the name of the other prophet. I just got the name of Sweet Memory.
You got sweet medicine and you
Sweet
have
medicine.
erect horns.
Pardon?
Erect horns.
Erect.
Or standing up horns, whatever. It's a sacred buffalo calf and the horns stood up. So there are those that call them erect horns, horns that stand up straight.
Thank you.
What other nations were your enemies? Not the white man, but other Indian tribes, or what were your enemies? Did you have other?
There certainly are differences with the Pawnee. They had taken our arrows, they captured our arrows. They still have 2 of them. I'd like to say that I've got good friends that are Pawnee, but there are those kinds of enmities that exist. The Utes were the Arikara, because they took our corn. But beyond that, if there were intrusions upon hunting territory, but the Pawnees were the ones that I think that we had a great deal of differences with because they took our covenant, they took our arrows, they still have to.
May I ask one more? You referred to the dog show soldiers. Did other tribes have their quote-unquote renegades also, or were they renegades? Were they a fraternity? What were the dog soldiers, the Cheyenne dog soldiers?
I don't know that I would call them renegades. They might have become renegades after Sand Creek, after you understand conceptually what happened at Sand Creek and what happened to the Cheyennes. They were incensed by the butchery and the savagery that occurred. Yes.
But within
They
your-
were wanting to exact revenge.
Yeah, but within
Black
your-
Kettle tried to advise against it. There are other groups that have their warrior societies that are just as brave, and the dog soldiers were not always out just fighting. They were the rear guard. They wanted to make sure they were the protectors. They were the ones that were very brave, very courageous, who in battle sometimes stake themselves to the death. And so that we do have warrior societies. They were not created so much for war as they were to, as protectors. My son is a member of the Bowstring Society. They build the lodges for our ceremonies. They gather the timber, they're the protectors, they're the providers in a very traditional sense. There was a separation between civil and military powers. So I think what we have to keep in mind is whereas there might be that contingent, our rulers were the peace chiefs, 44 of them. And we were a people that were more oriented toward maintaining the peace than we were wanting to be at war. It did occur, differences created, situations created certain attitudes.
There are 30,000 Cheyenne in Denver, and there are Cheyenne, the northern Cheyenne in Montana. How's it going for you in Montana? What's the modern Cheyenne?
The Cheyennes numbered 10 bands, and we only came together during our great ceremonies. And after our ceremonies, the sun dance, the arrow renewal, they used to have an crazy animal dance. And we went on a communal buffalo hunt together, and then we went to our traditional winter camping grounds after those ceremonies. And so we didn't all stay together because we were very environmentally conscious that, if we were all together, imagine the pony herd and the effect upon the environment. And so there were some of those bands that traded in the south. There were those that continued to do their trading in the north along the Missouri River. And then treaties came along, and so it was continued trade activity for some who had formalized their relationship with the Bent brothers, and one of the Bent brothers had married into the Cheyenne tribe, and so there were those that said, we're going to trade on the Arkansas. And then the treaties that were entered into, so it was the treaties that separated us into northern groups and southern groups, and so after we negotiated a few treaties, we were the ones that were pushed into Indian territory, and the northern Cheyennes continued to stay out. And some of them were brought to live with us in Oklahoma, and they're the ones that walked back north. And ultimately, those that walked back north said they were accustomed to living in what they call their beloved Northland. They wanted to live in the mountainous climates where they could smell the pine trees and the like, and so they couldn't live in the south with us. And you know that brave march of that less than 300 who managed to get from Indian territory back north, only to have some report into or be taken to Fort Robinson and others go out to the Nebraska Sandhills. So that more or less divided us into a northern segment and a southern segment.
Dr. Mann, our group has been reading Little Big Man. Would you just say a couple of words of what you think about Little Big Man, the book and the movie?
Do you think that he really survived to be at the Battle of the Greasy Grass? No, I think it's a wonderful story to tell. I like the old chief. But I think what I saw was this whole capacity that we have to make relatives. And see how Chief Watchskins adopted him as grandson? And they had quite a wonderful relationship as grandparents to the grandson. And I think it was more or less a commentary, just like Little Big Man said. You know, my grandpa, or Chief Watchkin's version of war was real different from the way that the soldiers fought war, because Chief Watchskins and them were much more into going and counting coup on the enemy rather than slaying them. So it's really, I guess, a commentary from the eyes of a non-Indian who was adopted into a Cheyenne family, and he talked about the cultural differences and the difference in cultural views. And I really like that classic statement. And there was a time when our elders were so spiritually strong that they could will their deaths essentially, or go out to die. And whenever Chief Watchkins went up on the hill and lay down to die, and the rain dropped on his face, and he said, "Grandson, am I still in this world?" And Justin Hopkins said, "Yes, grandfather, you still are." And he says, "Well, okay, let's get up and go and eat." He said, "Sometimes the magic works and sometimes it doesn't." Sometimes it works that way, doesn't it? And so I think that it's easy to understand. It's not as graphic as other history books are. It's a good read for those that are just wanting to venture in and look at another people's culture. Maybe a little bit Hollywood-ish, but still.